Hey, what's going on? Welcome to another episode of Hanging Out with Nolan HOWNH. And joining us this week on the podcast is a tremendous life coach. It's a gentleman that I was introduced to through a mutual friend of ours. And we were just talking story. And as I learned more about him, I just became more and more fascinated with his approach to how he coaches, but also how he has dealt with things in his life. And he has a tremendous backstory. And we just had this click. We just vibed really well. And so I asked him to be on the podcast. Thankfully, he said yes. And he's joining us now. He is an extraordinary life coach. Please help me welcome Mr. Dan Barone. Hey, Dan.
Hey, Nolan. Thank you so much for having me. I'm thrilled to be here with you and just get to continue our conversation.
There's the audience. They're a little delayed here. Oh man, Dan. So we were talking earlier before we started recording, and Dan and I have been planning to do this podcast episode for like almost a month and a half now. And every week that we would reschedule, something would happen. Like I'd get even more sick, or something else would happen with my health and stuff. And Dan has been so patient and gracious. Like, sure, next week, yeah, next week. And so I almost was like, will this ever happen? And so I'm so glad that we finally are doing this, Dan. This has been something that I've been really looking forward to for a long time.
Well, thank you so much. It's just what life gives us, right? And we have two choices, right? We can either respond to it or we can be reactive. And I think the default, right, when we're coming from a place of, of pain or wounding, right, that reactivity is kind of the default. But where we want to strive for is response, right? If we're reacting, that says our story is telling us something is not safe, right? It's typically a reaction that's from an emotional trauma or something that's, I'm not safe. I have this response. Becoming aware of that and going, okay, well, how am I going to consciously choose to respond? In this situation, right, you can't control when you're getting sick, right? And just like I couldn't control if the same thing happened to me, and it did, right? So it's one of those things where, okay, why don't I treat this situation, you and me, with grace, right? That's something I think we can all use a little bit of when we're interacting with anybody, just to see the human on the other side of the screen, right? Or this human and the stranger that we bump into in the supermarket or whatever. It's that person has a lot going on, right? I know it's very it's pithy. There's this cliche of, don't judge somebody until you've walked a mile in their shoes, right? But I think it's really like getting down to the rawness of that. It's important to remember that everybody's got shit going on, right? Everybody has stuff going in their life, and let's not make judgments. Most of the things, again, there's that other kind of proverb of like, don't attribute to malice, which can be attributed to ignorance. I would also argue don't judge somebody out of the way, if they're doing something because you feel unimportant or unvalued. That's something that, you were very sick and just, very communicative about, like, hey, I'm not able to meet this. Oh my God, I want to treat that with respect and honor your situation and come to like in a place of acceptance because I have sympathy and compassion and empathy for your situation. And if that was approached differently, right, I'm not tooting my own horn. I'm just saying in the past when I was more reactive, right, when I was not who I am now, I would have questioned like, oh man, maybe he just doesn't want to meet with me. Maybe I'm just not important, right? Those were those old narratives that would get just told again, perpetuated through, the things that I would look at, the perspective, the lens through which I viewed the world was very much like, again, a victimhood of something I'm not important. And so it would slant all of my perceptions. I say all this to say, I'm so glad we're here. We're doing this. And of course, like, let's just approach this situation, not just with us, but in the world as we interact with others with a sense of grace and compassion of like, hey, where's this person coming from? Can I connect to the human being that's inside there and really just experience what this person has to offer? Because I think everybody's got a really powerful story if we choose to be willing to listen.
It's so funny you said that because the way you described how you years previous would have reacted is exactly the same conversations that I would have in my head if I was in your shoes. I would be like, oh, maybe they don't want to talk to me, or maybe they regretted offering that and such. And it's so interesting that we have this kind of like default to go to that negative, self-deprecating type of perception of ourselves.
Well, we're so programmed. I mean, really, it's, again, I'm kind of diving deep to start, but we generally receive instruction or receive our marching orders one of three ways, right? When we're little, we have things that we're programmed with, right? We see advertisements. We are told certain things, right? We are programmed by our family, our environment, our society. There's things that are modeled to us by our parents, by authority figures that we watch and learn from. And then there's, of course, the kind of instructional or the programming, I'm blanking on the word. That's right. It'll come back to me. Not important right now. But essentially now it's sticking there. Anyways, it's not important. It will come back to me.
When in doubt, I'll just go the stuff.
The stuff. Stuff is a great word. It's all encompassing. Yeah. Programming, instruction. Yeah, you talked me up, and now I'm blanking on this thing. It's totally cool. This is my humble pie. It doesn't matter. Basically, we are bombarded by our environment, whether it's society, whether it's family, friends, etc., with a ton of instructions, a ton of situations which teach us how to be a person. The problem is, and it's not a problem, it's just the reality of it, most of these people and these environments are teaching from a place of hurt, right? And so we're programmed from a young age that suffering is normal, that life is essentially this big drag, that we are in it, like the expression, life sucks, then you die, right? You're in this long, painful suffering that you're not supposed to enjoy your work. You're not supposed to have fun doing things that fill you with joy, because again, that's just not the way things work. There's parts of life that suck. But yeah, I mean, really, yes, there are parts of life that aren't fun, right? But you have that because there also is the other side, that life can be amazing, and you have these really cool moments, and many of them that deserve to be celebrated, that deserve to be magnified and enjoyed in full. And I think the coolest thing for me in my healing journey was realizing, again, getting to this place where kind of a light bulb went off, and it goes, oh, wait a second, you're telling me that I am creating what's essentially happening to me, right? I am choosing what's happening. And until that awareness dawns, it's well, this is just what happened to me. My story is people abandon me, people leave me, I'm not good enough, right? My inner critic was the worst at just telling me what a piece of shit I was. I was the lowest of the low, and I'm so codependent that I needed other people to be able to validate me. I need this because I'm not capable of meeting my own needs, right? And then as I went through my therapy and my healing journey to this point, right, it's never over, but to this point, going wait a second. So I was essentially repeating that pattern, and all that is, right, when we're repeating a pattern, we're trying to break the cycle. We don't know how. So we're just reliving it and hoping that something will come up. And I found this awareness dawn, and I was wait, so I can actually choose what I want to become, right? It's not set in stone, right? So if what we focus on, right, this premise of what we focus on, we then create. If I'm focusing on all the negative shit that's happened to me, all this stuff that has gone wrong, and all the things the reasons why I'm not good enough, and these stories that keep perpetuating, no wonder it's what I'm seeing. That's what I'm creating.
Yeah.
If I can learn to rewire, reprogram, right, it becomes so much more open. I'm sorry. Go ahead. I don't want to hog.
No,
hog
I'm so excited, because this is why I was so excited to have you on the podcast and just to have this conversation with you, because even when we first spoke and hearing you talk now, it's so much of what you say is it's almost yes, that's me too. I feel I have had such a parallel type of perspective, experience, and the same way I was experiencing my journey as well. And the funny thing is, what I've been learning is that these destructive and negative comments that I hear about myself all come from just me. They had actually never in reality come from anyone else, just but myself. It's the craziest thing.
It's the wild. No, you're 100% right. It's so wild, right? When we really step back and listen, and go okay, the stuff that I'm saying to myself, not just the content of the words, but what is the tone in which it's spoken, right?
Yes.
What is the tonality, the intonation of the words? This is mean. It's scornful. My inner voice was so deriding and just cruel to me. Again, just the worst things. I would never talk to somebody else that way. And I would never accept being talked to that way. No, I'm getting out of here. I would not accept that from anyone. But yet it's permissible for me to talk to myself that way. Something doesn't add up here. Why?
Yeah.
Why is that okay? And again, those things that come up, like on a certain level, I believe that was my story. And I think a lot of us do that without even realizing it, right? It's really interesting to dive into, go, okay, where is that inner voice coming from? And what parts of this are, again, speaking truths that I've adopted, right? It's multi
Hmm.
truths, but they're beliefs that are held, things that I feel that are true, right? And it really does program us for the life in which we are creating actively.
Why do you think that we do? I mean, what you said is exactly true. And someone even brought it out to me at one time. Like, would you ever say that or in that way to someone else? I'm like, heck no. But why do you think that we do change that rule for ourselves and speak in the way or think in those thoughts that we would never cast on anyone else but to ourselves? It's like easy, just like, yep, this is how I feel. You're not going to do this and you're not good enough and all that kind of stuff.
Again, I think it's really layered. It's a dynamic thing, but it does go back to, a large part of it goes back to childhood here. And again, I'm not a therapist,
Hmm.
right? I've gone through some pretty intensive therapy, and I
Yeah.
use what I've learned from like my cognitive behavioral background in therapy and some classes I've taken, and just put it kind of through the lens of my own experience and what it's been like for me. And this is what I've come up with, right? We, again, it goes back to that programming. We are bombarded by a society in which they tell us, right? It's bad advertisement to go, hey, you have everything you need already inside of you to feel happy. That doesn't sell
Hmm.
very well. So, by the marketing agencies, their job is to make their product desirable so that you go and purchase it, and they're extremely proficient. They're really good at this. I'm not decrying capitalism here, but I'm just saying to be aware of, oh, if we're constantly told from essentially birth, hey, you need this product, this makeup, this Coke, right? Great example. Coca-Cola, brilliant marketing strategist, right? Apple. There's so many excellent, advertising and marketing agencies or companies that have this. You're constantly told this is what will bring you joy. This is what will bring you happiness. Buy our product. All of this. It tells us we are not good enough as we are. We are not good enough with what we bring to the table. We need this to be fulfilled. Also, I know personally from my experience, I was beaten over the head with the hammer of Jesus. And it's not to decry religion as well, but the way in which I was instructed was I was not good enough on my own. I needed
Yeah.
something externally that made me worthy, right? So this story of unworthiness, right? This lack of self-worth was very present in my life, and again in my story from an early age, and just was compounded again. Certain things that happened, and I'll share my story here in a minute, but things I remember vividly from, I don't have a lot of childhood memories, but the ones I do remember were the ones where that story then got perpetuated, right? Somebody defriending me on a bus when I was young, first grade, I think,
Mm.
saying, you're not cool enough to be my friend, right? Like, yeah, mean, but also not life changing. It's like, okay, that stuff happens, right? Kids are mean sometimes. But wow, that stuck with me. Like
Yeah.
through my divorce, I was left, right, in different relationships. Oh, I was left behind. This perpetuation of abandonment, right? The story of abandonment. I must not be good enough because these people are leaving me. Oh, wow, my father left, right, at a younger age. So, whoa, all of these things then compound. So, of course, this narrative gets fed. The other part of that, right, when we dive into the inner voice, oftentimes the voice is repeating things that we heard at a young age. Most of the time, parents, not always, can be just the environment, but the voice that talks to us, it's in our own voice. It's not actually us that's speaking. It's the voice of someone else, an authority figure from when, or figures from when we were younger, that we're essentially parroting back our interpretation of what they
Mhm.
were saying. And so
Right.
it's
Right.
become our voice. We believe that it's ours. It's not. It's not actually our true voice. And that's a really important
Yeah.
distinction to make.
Man, just in hearing the little bit that you shared already of your story, this is why I think we connect so well. It's like we've lived parallel lives from the religion thing to the abandonment. It's like yes, I get it. Now you're making
I
it
see
make
you.
sense to me. Thank you for explaining that. No, before I really am excited to get into your story, but before we do, I just wanted to touch on one more thing that you had mentioned earlier about
Yeah.
how, recognizing that everyone has their own backstory as to like when you get to them, you know, having that grace of understanding that you don't know what they're going through and such. And I really wanted to highlight that again, because I think that is something that I definitely agree with and resonate with, and I've been trying really hard in my later years now to really adopt that and put that into practice, because before, when I was younger, I would just, anytime any kind of negative interaction, or if someone cuts me off or whatever, I just automatically chuck it up to, that's a bad person, or this person's
Right.
crazy, or all
They're a
these kind of
jackass.
things.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then it's like, but now, as I go through my own healing journey and understanding myself, I'm like, wow, there's so many things that have laid the foundation to get me to this point where this is why I react this way, or this is why I say things that way. And now then to pair that with, my experience with others, I'm thinking they must have their own journeys and their own foundations. And I know from my experience, like, yeah, I've had it where I had such a horrible day and I'm stressed out, and the person at the check counter, I just had, this is my last nerve, and I'm short and curt with them, and it's like, that's not me. I don't want to be like that to someone who didn't deserve that. But at that interaction, I'm sure the only interaction they ever had with me is like, man, that guy is such a jerk. It's like, no,
Right.
don't judge me on that one moment. And so I really love that you had brought that up and explained that, because I think the more that we as a society can kind of really adopt that understanding, that grace and that kindness, I think that's where we can start to connect a lot more, and stop having these divides between us.
I love that. Thank you for bringing that up. And it's something I'll dive into a little more. I think it's really important now more than ever because the world is smaller than it ever has been. We are more connected virtually. Again, you're in Hawaii and I'm East Coast in Vermont, little tiny snowbound state here. And we wouldn't have ever met if not for the
Right.
capabilities of the internet, right? So the fact that we can talk and have a conversation in real time, in we can just magnify that on a global scale, like with the ability to be really connected from anywhere in the world. It's smaller than it's ever been, and it's only
Hmm.
going to get more connected. And so realizing sometimes we see so much toxicity on the internet, especially whether you're on social media sites or doom scrolling through your feed or whatever, realizing, hang on, there's a human behind the screen. There's a human on the other side. And it's so easy to fall into that trap of, like, again, just being triggered or reactive. If I see
Yeah.
something that's personally against one of my values, I get activated. Of course, like I'm human. Like that happens. It's real. It's not fighting against that urge. It's just asking those kind of like self introspection of like, okay, why am I feeling so triggered by this? What is the other person going through? Right. That what you said. Absolutely, right? Like everybody's got this story. You may have had the worst day, and that person, again, that's their only interaction with you, which I think is it's so important. Again, you brought up the awareness of it. Now in our later years, where we're at, right? We're the oldest we've ever been, and we'll never be this young again. But where we are now, right, in our point in life, we have this awareness that's dawning and going, oh my gosh, I hadn't considered this before. I think we start out, right, as teens especially, very myopic, like the world is me and everything is like these feelings, and then we become more broad in our 20s. And I'm 34, right? I'm in this place of like starting to really see my place in the world, and I have a very solid sense of self now. I can actually say that I love myself, which prior to a few years ago was a foreign concept to me. So now coming into this place of going, whoa, like life actually is cool if I allow it to be as beautiful as it is. And it's also equally hard. There's, you have the dichotomy of both. I have to know the sorrow to
Right.
experience the joy, but it's all part of this, unraveling of the human experience. It's not just one. And I think like despair, I'm getting way off track here, but
No.
despair happens, right? Despair happens when we see like, again, this relationship between pain and suffering, right? We see pain or we experience pain and there's the absence of hope, right? Then it becomes suffering. It becomes this permanent state of pain that we don't see a light at that end of that tunnel, proverbially, right? That this idea that my pain is permanent. And that truly is that absence of hope, which is why, where I was for a long time. And so what I want to try to really do is, like you said, this parallel journey, right? You're like, oh, I felt that. And that's why I want to have these conversations, right? Because I think everybody to a certain extent deals with the
Hmm.
same stuff, but we don't feel relatable to other people. We don't see their humanity. We don't see that story
Yeah.
because we're not having these conversations. We're not asking, at all. And if we are asking, it's most often to respond. It's not to listen and to hear them.
Mhm.
So let's start opening up and having these hard conversations, the dark stuff, like the shit that we deal with, that everybody as human beings, in one form or another, deals with. Let's talk about it. Let's have that connectivity. Let's see the human
Yeah.
being on the other side of the screen and really say, how can I relate to this person, or how can I lessen their load? And again, part of that collective, right? Lift each other up. And I think that's becoming, especially for our generation, more and more vitally important the more connected we get.
Yeah, and I think the other thing that's what I'm starting to really learn and embrace is before the focus was always like trying to avoid pain, because that's something I don't, like if I could live a pain-free life, that'd be the dream. But instead, embracing that pain is an emotion, and it's a necessary emotion. And you're talking about, having that you probably use the word uh, correctly, and I'm going to butcher it, but like the dichotomy, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, but having like pain is instead of looking at it as such a negative, it's looking at it as a necessity, like having all of our senses, like we want all of them. And so in order to uh, fully live, like we should feel all of these emotions, right? Versus
We
before, I think
can't
we would
cut
always
off.
be like, hide it, shove it down, like don't, don't approach those kind of feelings, right?
So spot on, and actually, like, it was a perfect. It's perfect because this is, again, we'll get to the story eventually, but like, I think masculine wise, right? Masculinity, we were allowed to feel anger, right? Socially,
Right.
acceptably, in this macho way, toxic masculinity. If you feel anger, don't you dare be sad, don't you dare be depressed, like any of these other feelings, but anger is acceptable because that's empowering. No, I mean, anger is protective, and there's a lot of motivation behind anger. It's a secondary emotion at the very least,
Hmm.
that's generated usually by feeling unsafe, some a fear of some sort. But
Right.
beyond that, what you're saying is so spot on. The pain is part of the human experience. Pain is actually necessary for growth. We look at there's so many
Mm.
analogies to this in the world, right? When we look at the butterfly breaking out of its cocoon, right? If we help it and try to break it out to save it the pain of that experience, most likely it will die, right? The
Yeah.
pain of childbirth, right? The pain of pruning a plant. Let's look at this, right? I'm causing
Yeah.
damage to the plant to try and correct its growth path. Refining a metal, right, is a hot process, right? The forging of, a diamond from coal, right? There's so many, building muscle, honestly, working out, pain.
Right.
It's
Right.
actually a very stoic principle, right? The way is through, right? Is that pain is there. It's not like weakness leaving the body. What it is communication. It's telling us
Mm.
something. And we need to be able to be aware and respect that and say, okay, what are you telling me? Instead of the old way. And I think this is our parents' generation, or a lot of times was, suck it up. And then
Yeah.
there's like that side of, where it's the aspect of pain avoidance, which I totally get. And it's this quote by Nisargadatta Maharaj, is an Indian guru, that was, pain exists in the body, suffering in the mind. And I'm going to paraphrase and butcher the rest of the quote, but it's
Mm.
basically, again, pain is neither good nor bad. It just is. It is
Yeah.
necessary. But suffering is the state we enter into mentally, where it becomes encompassing. There is no freedom from suffering. It's a cage. It's a prison. And so if we believe two things, right? If we believe that the pain is necessary for our growth, right? I'm going through this pain for a purpose. It becomes so much more bearable. And the second part of that coin is, if I'm not given, again, whatever someone's views on spirituality, I would come to this now from a place of the universe, or this universal consciousness, whatever. Some people may call it God, some people may be from an atheistic perspective, but realistically, if I say the universe will never give me more pain than I'm capable of bearing, right? This will stretch me, this will expand my capacity, and yeah, there's going to be some days where things kind of suck. Also, I will be more after this. I'm going to become more. If I never work out and I never push myself, I will not build muscle, right? That's a very apt and very easy analogy to,
Mm.
well, why should I endure this pain? Because it's for your highest and greatest good. And learning how to sit, and you said the perfect word, embrace that pain as one of the ways in which our body and our emotions communicate with us. wow, it enhances the experience. It's because I've known the depths of darkness that I now have this profound joy in my life. The catharsis was so powerful in the opposite direction, coming out of this place of despair and like, well, I mean, really 20 years of suicidal ideation, that I can now go, I have the best life, and I can see the joy in every single day in its own perfection, of course, being imperfect, right? But it's magical. Like I have this text with a couple of coach friends of mine that I love dearly, and we are constantly back and forth to each other, like, "Hey, this is my celebration from today." And sometimes it's just like, my celebration today is I didn't go nuclear, right? That's basic, real, like human stuff. Sometimes it's like, wow, all these things lined up today, but it's just this constant reaffirmation of like, look at all this good stuff that happened. I'm going to focus on this because I want to create more of the same. It doesn't mean you ignore the bad stuff. It just means you measure it. You don't let it activate you to a point where it's like, oh, this is like, again, that becomes your primary focus point. You hold space, you accept it and go, yeah, this happened. What can I learn from this to do differently next time? How can I make different choices? Or, okay, what is this showing me about myself, right? Where do I need to set a clearer boundary? Where do I need to evaluate this relationship? Is this still a productive relationship that's serving me? Also, am I serving it, right? There's the other side of that coin too. So it just is all for us to learn from, to grow from, if we choose to see it that way. Oftentimes, again, that programming, the instruction or correction is to the victim story. Oh, these things are happening to me, right? I choose to believe that life happens for me. And in doing so, I've taken my power back and I've reclaimed that agency where I can now consciously create the path that I want to walk. And it's pretty cool.
Man, everything you're saying, I'm getting like goosebumps because it's like, yes. And like you, I mean, I grew up in the church and I would witness like everybody just like moved by the Spirit and like, yes, amen. And I always was like, I know, I don't know what that feels like to like just feel like yelling out like, yes. And then as you're speaking, all I felt was like, yes, amen, brother. So that was awesome. Thank you so much for sharing
Of
that.
course. You're welcome.
And I think what's good for those listening to know is, and I love that you're willing to share your stories. When we hear someone of your perspective and with your experience, um, it's easy for us to just think like, oh, this guy's got it all figured out. Like he was born with all the answers, and he doesn't have a stress in the world. It's easy for you to have this like positive perspective, but in talking to you before, your life story is quite complex with a lot of growth, and so I thought it'd be really neat for us to hear kind of your journey in how you've got to this point in being a life coach, having these perspectives, being able to look back at all of these lessons and kind of dissect them and put them together to what we just talked about just now in the last 15-20 minutes. So where did this all begin for you as far as the foundation for what you've kind of gotten to this point now in your journey?
Thank you, Nolan. That's what a perfect segue. Look at you, pro. I love that because I know it's a natural lead of the conversation. Yeah, and I guess the best way to do it is really from the beginning. I was born into I would get a privileged life growing up. I middle class white male in Vermont, which is, a pretty, I would say, somewhat affluent state. Like I never wanted, right? I didn't have the hard life of somebody coming from, an inner city family that was struggling to make ends meet. That wasn't my story. But in its own way, it came with a different set of expectations and pressures. My dad was very fundamentally religious and a very traumatized person. I love him and also can recognize his unhealed wounds. And that's been a lot of my healing journey over this past year. I was, again, beaten with the hammer of Jesus, and it was very much a conditional love type of relationship. I was good enough if I behaved, if I acted a certain way, if I followed the instructions and was essentially what he wanted, I would receive connection. And if I didn't, I would receive disconnection, and that felt awful. It's like that, be mad at me, don't be disappointed, I can't stand the disappointment, right? Like that's disconnection is really painful. So I
Yeah.
grew up with that like type of modeling in, not demonizing him. He had a lot of stuff that never got worked out. And understanding that now gives me compassion. But at the time, I was very much like, I need to do whatever he needs me to do so I can feel that connection and that love from him. And, again, okay, well, I'm getting this, idea of God as being this, father figure. Oh, that I'm, equated the two in my head. Again, is that the message of Jesus? No, but that was how I interpreted it. And so this idea that, Dan as I was not good enough. And through, growing up in my single digit years and then into early teen, my father left the house, got a divorce, my folks divorced, and he left. And I was suddenly the man of the house at 13. And, of course, exactly who you are and very, very much self-assured and have, no emotional volatility at that point. Right. Yeah. Said no one ever. So it was
when
really,
I look, when I look back before having having kids through being a stepfather, I used to think if you were to say 13, I'd be like, oh yeah, like I in my imagination, super like mature and everything. And then now when I see the 13-year-old, I'm like, oh my gosh, look how tiny this guy is, and like look how young they are, and look how so much more to life that they haven't even touch or scratch the surface. Like 13 is super young.
it's young. And so that point of just, you're so right. Like I'm watching my son is 12 and a half, 13 and just about, and he's experiencing like middle school, like, man, I do not miss it. Right. It's like, it's heavy. You're starting to learn about like relationships and boundaries and, okay, this person is toxic. How do I then approach the situation? All of that. So again, that's that frame of reference at this time. Yeah. And I started to like, again, through this process, develop some really codependent personality traits because again, I viewed myself as not good enough. I was not worthy to receive connection as I was. I had to act or be a certain way to feel what I desired as, again, intimacy. I wanted to feel loved and held. And again, both of my parents, I know they love me. They loved me and do love me. It was just the way I interpreted it at that time, and also their own stuff, right? Let's not pretend that all of our parents were perfectly well-adjusted people. Yeah. They're still very human, and that's part of their journey is figuring their stuff out. Some of them face into it. Some of them don't, just like some of us do, right? So it's one of those things of just having compassion for somebody's experience and also what the environment they were raised in. Like my folks are... my dad's gone now, but my mom is, in her later years and looking at her, her parents. I mean, that was World War II, Great Depression era, right? Like, whoa, okay, that's, totally different climate than we are experiencing, right? What did that do to shape them into who they were, right? The environment in which they were raised, and also like culturally, what was going on at that time, right? Civil rights, and, especially with the tone of, race and everything that was happening politically and all that stuff. Basically, what I'm advocating for is compassion when looking on the people who hurt you and seeing what did they experience. It doesn't justify it, but it helps to breed understanding. And so looking at it now, I can go, oh, wow. At the time, of course, no way I could have looked at it that way. And so it's just, this doesn't feel good. So the codependent personality traits, that very much a people pleaser, trying to, be the thing that people needed. I was a chameleon, especially through all of my relationships. Like I will be whatever you need, just love me so I can finally feel some shred of worth about me, and developed, just like a really heavy despair that was like, I'm in so much pain. I just want to die, but I don't want to die because I want to feel good. I just don't want to feel like this. So I would say I spent like pretty much all of my later teens and my entire 20s in a state of suicidal ideation. I mean, really, I would say not a day went by that I didn't in some form or another think about like, how could I kill myself today? Right? It's like heavy stuff. And people don't talk about this enough. Like we're becoming more comfortable with mental health discussions. But like, that was where it was really knife edge. And I had, I followed society's instructions in that what makes you happy, do these things. So like I had kids, got married, bought a house, at the time, again, it was one of those things just that seemed like the thing to do. So I did it. I got a high paying job, in sales. I was making a lot of money and I was miserable. I hated myself. I resented my kids. I resented my family. I resented all the choices I made. But most of all, I just could not stand me. And so I ended up falling into some substance abuse problems with alcohol. I just didn't know how to turn it off. I was trying to disconnect. And, it's funny, looking back, I'm like, oh yeah, the universe like made sure that I had tethers. My mom was a huge part. And actually, it's funny enough, I know I was, talking religion earlier, but my youth pastor when I was a teen, without him, I would not be here. Without my mom, same thing. And my kids too. I know I was supposed to have kids early because I would have absolutely not be having this conversation with you if I did not have my kids to keep me tethered to this world. So looking at those things and going, wow, that was really important. And also I was pretty much a hot mess through all of my 20s, and of course with substance abuse, things devolve. My relationship, my marriage was not good communication. We were both very traumatized, toxic people. And so we ended up getting divorced. I lost all the stuff, right? All the stuff, the money, the house, the car, all the shit gone. Get a new job, kind of an insurance, company. So it's interesting. I was in, the automotive business and then in insurance, both places where like they're viewed like with a very healthy degree of skepticism and wariness about like, what do you want from me? And I'm just like in here, like, let me please you, please. I need to. Exactly. Right. Love so me. Funny. Love me. Exactly. That's what I'm crying out to be loved. And so I'm in this, insurance business and I'm having a performance review. And of course, my entire structure of worth was performative, right? All of it performative. I have to perform to be, whatever the scenario was. And I didn't do well. And I was just like, at that moment, I had my crater, essentially. That was my moment of truth or come to Jesus moment where it was like, I started crying, like ugly, heavy crying in front of my boss. And I was like, I want to die. And she goes, are you okay? And no, I'm not. I'm not okay. I finally, I've tried to do this so hard on my own. And now I'm facing this stark reality that I cannot and I need help. And so at that point, it was kind of like, I don't want to say like the out of body experience, but it was very clear, like dissociation for a minute and going, okay, I have two paths in front of me. Path A is what I've been walking, and that path does not lead anywhere good. That path ends very quickly, and I'm just going to throw in my towel. Path B is I got to get some help, and I got to talk to somebody. And I chose that path, and I had an incredible support system around me in family and friends. So again, I'm not saying I did this on my own by any means. It's the community, that great collective that helps to lift us up that I'm a part of now. But it's this, again, the support system. I started seeing this therapist who I actually still see. He's more of a coach to me now, but again, tremendous, tremendous man who I have so much love for. And he saw me. He took the time to take an interest in me and to really say, okay, Dan, what do you care about? Like, what makes you you? And like, I felt heard and seen for the first time in I don't know how long. And that, like, I was validated, I was supported. And I promised myself two things. That one, I was going to do the work. And two, I was going to be honest with myself and with him. And those two commitments that were made all of the difference in the trajectory of getting from where I was to where I am now. That's, it's a small but very important distinction there.
Yeah, I'm curious because, as you described, getting to that point of realizing that you wanted to seek out help and you were fortunate to have these people around you that could help you. But how did you get past that barrier of to trust others to help you? Because knowing that you've dealt with this your whole life, knowing that you've had that self perspective of not being worthy and such, I would imagine that there is a huge barrier of like of trust to go out to somebody and say, here, I am opening myself to you and trusting that you will take care of this broken, shell of me and help me figure out how to put it together. Like that takes a lot of trust. And I think for a lot of people who are in that limbo of like, do I go and get help? That's what probably is the hardest thing to get past is, who do I trust? How do I trust somebody with
it's
me?
Awful.
Right?
It's awful, right? It's that is, and I look at myself, go like, I was so fortunate, right? Because many people have, again, very few people who they can trust. It's so funny you bring that up because I remember vivid conversations with my friends who, again, these are close inner circle friends who I know have me. And they're like, listen, you can always talk to me. You can always talk to me. And I go like, pretty much like, I know, and I won't. right? Like, I know, yeah, you bet your ass I'm not going to share anything. I'll be here for you. You can talk to me, but like me open up, yeah, no, I'm not important enough to open up. Or that's one, or the, you know what, my problems aren't important, or it's this person's going through something, or I don't want to add more on to them, or again, their
Yeah.
trust piece of like, is this really, when it comes down, is this person safe for me to trust with a very vulnerable, tender part of me that I don't know if I want to let see the light of day, right? We have these things that we keep inside because we believe they're too dark. Everybody has
Mm.
them. It doesn't mean to share them with everybody. It definitely be selective with who you trust with this kind of, again, information that's just like, hey, these are really not nice parts of my personality, or things that I've done, or things that like are just parts of me that I don't want necessarily super public. But everybody has them, right? Everybody
Mm.
has that dark side that, again, we can recognize, and we can find a few core people that we do have that trust relationship with. Again, now how does that happen, right? There's a level of vulnerability that's required. And that's not something that you get to easily, right? That trust is built over time, and it's built through proven action, right? A trust is not something that can be told, it has to be earned. And so for me to develop these relationships with these people was something that didn't necessarily happen until my later 20s into early 30s. Was, oh wow, like I'm feeling again that this person truly sees me. It was kind of like, it's really hard to articulate this. It's more of a feeling, in a sense, like, oh, I found my tribe, right? Like, these people get me on a sub level as well as the
Mm.
above surface. And so it's spending time with them, having conversations, finding common ground, and really kind of weeding through who has my best interest at heart, and do I have theirs, right? Because if that answer to that question is yes, like this person and vice versa, it's reciprocal, then that conversation can start to go on to those deeper levels. I think for me, the biggest thing was with this therapist, and I would say I started there and then branched out. My therapist, to really, again, we talk about fit a lot in the coaching world, where I'm
Mm-hmm.
not going to be everybody's flavor. I will be a flavor for some people, and others will not jive with my energy or my style. And that's good, because it means that I'm being authentic to me, and they are probably being authentic to themselves, or at least knowing what they want. There will be somebody out there for them, but don't pigeonhole yourself, right? And I had seen several therapists who were like, not a great fit, not a great fit. This one was the exact perfect fit for me. It was my shape, it was my flavor, and I felt seen and heard by him to such an extent that enabled me to open up these doors to the darker levels of like, what is broken in me? Everything help, right? Like, I want to find some way that life feels better so I don't die. So that was really, it's a great question, because it's where I think a lot of people get derailed. A lot of
Yeah.
people get derailed on that healing journey because they can't find the right fit in a helper, in someone in this service profession, or they don't have the friend support. And I had both, which was, again, I do know how fortunate that I am. I would just say to those who may be listening and are wondering about that support, start with one, right? One person who you think may be trusted, and start peeling back those layers a bit on the things that you think you can't talk about, and see where it goes, right? This is really a trial and error thing. The worst case scenario, it doesn't help. That's literally the worst case scenario. You're not going to be in any
And
worse
you're
position than you
back
are
where
now.
you are anyway, right? Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So many things we don't do because we're like, oh God, if this goes badly, then what? Right? You're going to be exactly where you are now. You just will have gained experience and knowledge, and tried something. Maybe it didn't work. Something will. It's just finding out what that right fit is, and that's, I think, where we sometimes just have to get out of our own way. It's it's very simple. There's nothing profound about that, but that's what I've found in my, through my experiences. Just try a bunch of stuff.
I'm glad that you explained that, though, as far as finding the right fit, and that you did go through multiple
Oh yeah.
therapists to find that right fit, because I think the misconception for those in who are seeking out, trying out therapy and such, is that therapists are the experts. So if it doesn't work out, it's the problem is me. And so therapy doesn't work for me because that it just so happened that wrong fit happened, and they don't realize it's just a matter of fit and style, versus they think that it's the problem is them and that their issues are not
Oh God.
fixable through therapy and such.
No, you're so right. And the other part too is there's so many modalities. So it's not just the person, but also what's the modality, right? And what I'm talking about for those who may not know in the self-care like world, there's like traditional talk therapy, which is very much up my alley, but there's also a lot of somatic or movement-based therapies. Like I know some yoga therapists. You're not ever going to talk about anything. The purpose is just to be present with your body, and things come up that are stored in the body. Like there's different types of chiropractic, right? There's Reiki, there's massage therapy, there's, acupuncture. There's so many different, like EMDR, a ton of different modalities of healing. Try them. Try things. Figure out what feels good, what works for you, what helps you connect deeper with you, with a deeper version of you or a higher self, whatever, and combine them. Like my therapist has so many different skill sets and trainings. He does traditional talk therapy and he's a Reiki master, right? He does a lot of different modalities because everybody's going to need something different, right? And it's being able to meet somebody where they are. And that's, to me, what I felt so seen by is he took the time in our first session to write notes down. He took okay, what's your ex-wife's name? What's your kids' names? Right. And just really, I felt seen. I felt heard. I was listened to, and I felt comfortable enough to share with him some things that were bothering me. So it was a willingness on my part and his capacity to meet me there where I was and not go, oh yeah, one size fits all, or here's some medication. It was like,
Right.
let's really dive into this. And so I give him so much credit. It took two. It is a partnership. So again, not that it's the right fit for everybody. For me, it was, but that's why I'm just advocating for people to try different things, to experiment. If it doesn't feel right, then don't go with it. It's not your fit, not your flavor, and try different connections with different people in your life. Right? There is no magic bullet, and I think that's it's people who are looking for the solution that's going to look differently to every single person. There's no right way. It's just your way that you're figuring out. So, from that point, I want to give you a chance to respond if you have anything. But from that point into my next journey, if you're ready, I will continue.
Yeah, no, I was going to mention that I'm assuming that once you found these support systems, it wasn't like, oh, the next day you're all good. Like that's just the beginning of this journey, and I think it'd be really great for you to share, the process, because I think for those who have not gone through similar paths or have not tried therapy and such, they might have a misconception of like how you go to a doctor, like, oh, I have a toothache, and then they give you a prescription and you're good the next day kind of thing. This is just more of starting to lay the foundation of, okay, the work is starting here now, right?
You know this so well. Absolutely. It's oftentimes, right? I use this analogy with my clients a lot, right? When you're going to build something, you don't add on to an existing structure that has flaws. You need to kind of tear it down first, right? You need to make sure that the foundation's solid. So there's a bit of deconstruction that happens. This is something that I do a lot of work with, again, in my practice, is diving into, we all have a bunch of limiting beliefs, right? Things that we accept to be true about ourselves and about the world. These are generally built on premises that we have previously adopted, which are a way of looking at things. I'm not going to say they're false. We believe them to be true, and so they are true, right? Because that perception is truly our reality. So if I say I'm not a feelings person, I am just limiting myself so heavily on the things that I'm choosing to be able to experience, right? I'm doubling down on that belief of I don't do emotions, right? Or like, I'm such a fuck up, right? That type of stuff where it's like, I'm capable of doing, I can't have anything nice, right? Or like, oh man, everybody always leaves me. All of these things, again, I know you use a lot of generalizations or sweeping generalizations, but all beliefs of that type, right, have created essentially contributed to the foundation of the identity that was old Dan. And so old Dan had or younger Dan, excuse me when I say that, right, like had a very limited worldview because those truths were commonly held as generalizations, subjective truths that were part of me. So in the process of therapy, right, is kind of peeling back, lifting that trapdoor and going, whoa, this basement's pretty messy, right? Like I've got to do some cleanup here. Deconstructing those limiting beliefs. It's not super pleasant. It's not super fun. It's hard work. It is incredibly worth it. I cannot describe how much empowerment I feel today because I went back down into that dark basement, cleaned out the cobwebs, took out the trash, and started building solid foundational work, diving into the identity of who, like, not before who I am, but like, how did I get this way? Like, who am I, but how did I get this way? Then who do I want to be, right? So it's a lot of the same type of work I do with my clients now is like, okay, let's start off. Who are you and what do you want? Now, understand, how did you get this way? What are the beliefs that contributed to this? Who do you want to become, right? And reforging that identity of someone who is empowered to love, to create, to be absolutely just vibrant at a high level of the things that bring you joy. So through this process, right, this idea of like, oh, Dan, I did a ton of inner child work. Danny, my childhood name, which I had thrown away. I was like, oh, that's a kid's name. I don't want to be called that. Like, I realized he was still in there. He was in here. I had locked him away in a cage because I thought that he wasn't good enough, right? That childhood story coming back. He wasn't good enough. And I locked him away. He's still there. So kind of making peace with that, healing that, holding space for that child and go, hey, it's okay. You can come out now. And I'm still me. I'm vibrantly joyful. That's the essence of who I am, is a joyful person. I was so sorrowful because I had essentially betrayed that part of me. I locked it away and said, no, it's not allowed to come out because that was the story that I had perceived to be true when I was younger. So that healing work, again, years. We're talking years. We're not talking, a few weeks here. It took me at least 3 years of intensive therapy to get through that. And everybody's journey is different. But for me, that was what it took. And I realized as I healed those things, right, it's cyclical. I don't just heal it and it's done. It's I healed it and it's going to come around again. And because my perspective has shifted, I can now see new things. I can go to a deeper layer. It's like the onion, right? There's always another layer. And that's when I kind of hit me a couple things. One, that the healing journey is not an externally focused destination of, oh, I'll be healed or enlightened or better. It's truly an experience. I am better today than I was yesterday. And tomorrow I hope to be better than I am today. And it's all for my highest and greatest good, right? It's all to make me a more realized and actualized version of myself. Oh, cool. So is there, like, I used to think I had to get the answers to the test for life. Like, people know what they're doing. And it hit me. No one knows what they're doing. Nobody knows anything about what they're doing. We are all working it out together. Even people, again, in their 80s, they've never been 80 before. They don't know what's coming. So it's this idea that, oh, wait, not only are there not any answers to the test, there isn't even a test in the first place. All this pressure was for me. All of the stuff that I was putting on myself was to meet this unreasonable, like completely imaginary standard that I had to meet to be completely unreachable, like to be worthy of love, right? And when I hit that, I'm like, oh my God, what if I just didn't do that, right? It sounds super simple, like, but it was real. It was very profound for me of going like, what if I just was good enough, right? This idea of like, what if nothing was missing? Right? It very talk therapy, like, what if nothing was missing? What if you had everything already that you needed? Whoa. It made me viscerally uncomfortable the first time I was asked that by my therapist. I was completely not prepared for looking at that. I'm like, I am so flawed. There's so many things that are missing. But in truth, there wasn't. It's one of those things that was part of, again, the journey that I had a real struggle with. It was really interesting to dive into that and go, whoa. Okay, it changed my entire self-view, right? And that piece, I think, was the most powerful. Is that, I talk a lot about relationships, right? Because we have so many relationships in our lives, not just with people, but relationships with our jobs, relationships with our environments. The most important relationship that we have is the self-relationship. We are the one person that is around us all the time, right? I can never leave me. I can try to self-abandon, but I am around me 24/7. So wouldn't it make sense to make that relationship my highest priority and to be good to me and to cultivate a sense of belonging and love within myself? Because if I can be a better me, then I can be a better husband. I could be a better partner. I could be a better father. I could be a better son. I could, in all of these ways, to enhance the productivity of the other relationships in my life. If I'm in better integrity with myself, everything else, the level rises. So it was kind of one of those dawnings of like, oh, that's why I've sought for like love and connection from every other single relationship, especially romantic ones in my life, because the self relationship was in the trash can. It was so bad. It all clicked. I was like, yeah, interesting.
Yeah. Same. I feel like you're narrating my journey in my life too, because I think what was so toxic for me, or not toxic, what was so limiting for me was I would look at, well, this is the ideal. Like if I could have this, if I could have the wife and the picket white fence and stuff, then life will be good. And I thought of all of the external things that if I could just get this or obtain this, then I'll be good. It wasn't until I switched it of, if I can heal this and if I can be happy with me, then I can go out and get those things, or give to those, and we can equally exchange, versus this like, oh, if something else can fix me, then I'll be okay. It's just crazy hearing you say it. It's almost like I'm reading my book through your words,
Thank you for sharing that. And again, this is just a great example of why we need to be having these conversations more. When I
Yeah.
say we, I mean collectively, because all of us go through this some form or another, and knowing that it feels so isolating when you're going through it.
Yes.
Like I'm the only one, or nobody else. Like the thing again, I want to hit on real quick. Everybody else looks like they know what they're doing, because we're supposed to, right? We're masking. We all mask. Like when I came out about my like depression, people, I didn't know. Exactly. That was the point. I didn't want people to know, right? I wanted to look like I knew what I was doing because I was trying to find some semblance of worthiness, right? So this idea of, oh, well, that person seems to have it figured out. I promise you they don't. They don't have it figured out. They are putting on a face because maybe they have a really good self-relationship and they're actually really happy. It doesn't mean they know what they're doing, right? Even me, like, I don't know what I'm doing. I tell that to my kids all the time. I'm doing the best that I think that I can, right? Like in that idea of like, I'm trying and I'm going to continue making mistakes because that's part of human living, the human experience. The other part of it too, like, is reframing what a mistake is. I do not believe in mistakes as they're commonly perceived. I make the best available choice to me based on the situation that I'm in, right? No one person goes out and goes, yeah, I think I'm really going to just completely whiff it today. I'm going to do exactly the worst case scenario thing for everything, or I'm going to purposely try to screw up here. Nobody thinks like that. It's like, I'm going to do the best that I can with the tools that are available to me. Like, hey, this is one of those things. Can coaching or therapy, they can help you upgrade your tools, right? So like, go self-care, go self-development. But I'm going to do the best I can with the tools that I have to make the best decisions that I believe will set me up for success. That's generally, I would say, a commonly held reasonable belief that most people are trying to better their situation, to improve their life, to find some sort of happiness or meaning. So when we make a mistake or a choice that's not in our best interest or not optimized, what does it do? We can either beat ourselves up about it. Oh my God, I'm worthless. I keep making these bad decisions. Or we can say, hey, this decision didn't work out like I planned. What can I learn from this to make a better decision next time, or a safer decision, or a more successful decision? So is it really a mistake? Was it just an experience that I learned from, right? So doing that changed my whole perspective on mistakes and wrong. There is no wrong or right in my book. There are decisions that bring growth opportunities. There are decisions that I make that have caused me a ton of unnecessary pain, right? The universe or life is going to give us, it's infinitely kind as a teacher. It will give us as many opportunities to learn the lessons as we need. It's up to us how quickly we want to learn, because the longer it takes us, the more pain we're going to experience. It's still all for our benefit and for our growth, but I definitely had to go through so much pain to learn these lessons over and over and over and over again. It wasn't the universe beating me down. It was saying, you need to learn this, and I'm going to keep giving you the lesson. It's like that. I asked, I think it might be, God, what's the quote? It might be a Rumi quote. It's the, I'm going to butcher it. It's, I asked for patience and I received challenge, right? I asked for wisdom, that it goes on. I'm destroying it. So I'll just basically use the paraphrase of like, what you want to cultivate, you will receive that directly, which is in opposition to it, to help you grow that aspect or that attribute, right? Because that we talked about earlier, right? That process of growth is painful and worthwhile at the same time. So cultivating this awareness, right, of the, oh, wait a second. Whoa, nobody knows what they're doing, right? It gave me freedom. And in this sense, it was actually a really profound turning point for my life. Again, I was still doing, I had left the insurance company. I was on my own as an independent. I'd given myself the gift of freedom by leaving corporate America and going into business for myself. And it was terrifying and also exhilarating. And my dad, through this healing journey, I'd actually reconciled with my dad at that time, which is really cool. And he got diagnosed with a very aggressive form of prostate cancer. He ended up dying pretty fast. And so I'm here in this position selling retirement services to people that, from a very educational standpoint, from something holistic. I want to educate people. I want to make sure they have, the coverage that's, designed to help them. It's very, again, heart-centered. Even in, when I was in auto sales, it was more of a, hey, tell me what you want. I'm going to work my hardest to get it. And if we can't, it's not for lack of effort. Like, I was very much a rapport type of salesperson who was focused on the relationship aspect. That's always how I approach my business. It was always a service mindset. And so this idea of, hey, whoa, here's this guy who's 66 and he died at 67, right? What America tells us: sacrifice now, suffer now, be happy later, retire and have your happily ever after, like get all the things to make you happy. Here's a guy who worked and really never got his happily ever after. And how many of us never get that because the circumstances change? How many people, right? We assume we're going to get up in the morning because we've gotten up so many mornings. It's not a given. What if I didn't wake up, right? Was my life enjoyable, right? Did I have the things that really brought it to its maximum level of enjoyment, vibrance, all of the things that we desire? And it doesn't mean YOLO, right? It doesn't mean be irresponsible and just go off the chain unhinged. What it means is, am I doing things that are truly conscious decisions in my own best interest, that elevate me, that enhance my life, that serve others, in this way of engaging on a level that's, I think, very intentional. So I tie this all together with my dad. When I found out he was diagnosed and that he was terminal, I was driving home that day and I saw a bumper sticker on a car in front of me, and it said, "Don't postpone joy." And it really hit me at that time, very present, because I was like, oh, right. And so the kind of the truth that I adopted out of that was to prioritize joy, right? To make sure that I'm doing something that leads to my enjoyment of life, and also being empathetic in my joy, being able to rejoice with others when they have something that's very profound in their life, or something celebratory, or in the other ways of making sure that, again, that self-care aspect. Am I doing something? Like, for me, I love walks. Did I take a walk today? No, but I'm having a great conversation that brings me a ton of joy. So it doesn't always mean like throw everything out and just focus on you. What it does mean is make sure things are in balance, and that you're not cultivating more suffering or misery than you are. Again, I would say, I use the word joy a lot, but happiness is another one. Meaning, purpose, things that bring your life, I would say pleasure is another one. Contentment, satisfaction, right? And so those things that feel meaningful and worthwhile. So that was one element. The other two elements that kind of brought into this purpose-driven kind of approach to life is be present, be here now. And that's, it's a Ram Dass. I know Eckhart Tolle is a popular spiritual teacher now. I really got on the Ram Dass and the Alan Watts train on YouTube and started just watching a lot of their teachings. And a lot of it has to do, again, with presence, right? Alan Watts talks about the eternal now, right? Like we talk a lot about, this, again, fear and anxiety, right? Fear, is this, the focus on the past, right? Or fear is I'm afraid of what has hurt me in the past, and anxiety is I'm afraid that it will come in the future as well, right? But in the present, it doesn't exist. And where do we exist, right? We are only in a state of eternal now. Like, I can think about tomorrow, like what's going to happen tomorrow, but it's not here yet. In my conscious, like, perseverating on tomorrow, I'm losing the moment of right now that I actually have to talk with you, to interact and have a connection, because my mind is elsewhere, or I'm living in the regret of something that I've done, or the memory. Like, nostalgia is fun, right? It's fun to revisit things, but I want to make sure I'm not living there. I want to make sure I'm not living in the what has been, or focus too much on my plan of what will become and inevitably change. But what am I doing right now with my time? Am I living intentionally? And that's that third aspect, is being very intentional. What am I doing? Why am I doing it? Is it for my highest and greatest good? Is it for other people's benefit? Am I doing things just because? Am I going through the routine? Am I doing things that I don't really understand why? And if so, let's ask that question. So those parts all blended together when, essentially the things that I was listening to, the things that I was feeding myself with, like soul food, the experience with my dad, and kind of came together in this culmination of dissatisfaction with, hey, I'm helping people save for retirement. This guy is dying. We're missing the boat here. We are saying be happy, like sacrifice now, be happy later. I say be happy now, and later. We can have
Yeah.
both. And I was talking with my therapist slash coach, and he was like, Dan, have you ever thought about becoming a life coach? And I was like, no, I hadn't. Like, you can do that? Kind of opened me to that. And I was like, huh, okay. So I started to explore that and really found as I was diving in, like, everything in my life has built me for this. This is what I want to do. And the cool part about it is I can just be vibrantly me in my flavor of this is my experience. Again, I small amount of training, but really it's my lived experience that gives me the perspective. I still digest and grow and like take in so much information. I'm constantly evolving. I'm constantly becoming more. And so should everybody, like in that sense, not a should like you should, but like we are physiologically growing new cells, right? We have new cells biologically every day. Our viewpoints typically, like I chafe a little bit on belief, because when you define something as a belief, it becomes very set and rigid and ironclad of this is what I believe.
Yes.
What about an idea? An idea is malleable. An idea can shift and change and grow with you. So I love the concept of ideas or ideals, right? Values, principles that can guide us in our journey. But ultimately, that really led me into the coaching sphere of like, I have this gift that I have received. I have my experience that I've lived, and I want to bring this to the world to make sure that what the light bulb that I experience, right, of I can choose what I want to create, like we were talking about at the beginning. I want other people who are experiencing the sorrow and the despair, this suffering, to know that there is hope, right? It's not endless. There is a better way to live, and they can have access to it. And that's really my drive of why I'm in this work, why I'm in this field, and why I became a life coach.
I love that, and I love that we were able to take that journey with you, through you sharing that, because what it does to me is it helps make you relatable, in the sense of, if I'm going to be getting coached, or someone who is helping me, I want somebody who would understand and who has experienced it as well, so that they speak from experience. Versus, I think we have sometimes like this thought of, oh, an expert should have had all the answers and they had the perfect life. So that's why they're teaching me to have that, because I'm flawed. And so I need somebody who has had no flaws to try to learn from. I think what has been so helpful is realizing that, as you'd said in the earlier, that we're all flawed. We all have our stories. We all have our growth and our traumas. And so it's funny that when sometimes we hear about, like, I'm guilty of this, when I was younger, people that I knew who went into like become therapists or coach, I was like, really? But they're so messed up. Like, who are they going to help? And it's now that I understand this, it's like, thank goodness they are doing this, because they have put in the work. They have gone through the journey. They understand how to relate. So for you to be able to share this incredible journey of yours, and the experiences and the foundation that you have, it totally makes sense why you're a life coach, and also why you have this passion for it, and why that I'm sure that those who you work with, it's the right fit, because you understand who you are, or as and how you can, and the type of people that you resonate with and can help.
Thank you very much, Nolan, for saying that. I think you're right in that sense of again, looking at people from this status point of, oh, they have and I don't, right? They have it together,
Yes.
I'm not, right? Like, it's a complete fallacy, but it's perpetuated, right, by I think the social media game, right? It's that ideal that everybody puts on the social media face. Not everybody, it's too
Mm-hmm.
general, but a lot of people put on the social media face. That's not real. It's not authentic. It's not the life that we're living, right? We're seeing a part of it, an aspect of it, but not the
Mm-hmm.
truth in that we're all flawed beings, right? And I think embracing that perfect imperfection is where we can find that community, right? We have the same starting point, really, and same ending point, right? Like, again, we started on the religion, right? Like, from dust to dust. There's so many elements in there that they're really the reason it resonates. I think there are a lot of truths that, I don't practice. I would not define myself as religious. I'm very spiritual, but I'm not a believer in religion. But I think there are some incredible truths in any religion that you can point to and say, that does resonate with me.
Yeah.
And I think that looking at people, I want somebody who's relatable too. And that was like the fit with Jim, my therapist, is like, he gets me and he's also lived it. Like, whoa, that's really important. You got to have that
Yeah.
relatability. They can't be untouchable. They have to be like, oh, this person's a real human, right? So it's because we want to connect in a real way that's meaningful and deep. I don't want somebody to give me fluff. I want the real shit, right? I want the real shit, because that's where that's the life we lead, is very real and raw and unpolished and messy. And that's something that I think is really important, again, to talk about. Actually, my friend Sarah Mayland and I just started our little podcast together called Our
Cool.
Messy Shadows, which is a kind of, again, the subline here is like, join us in our conversation as spiritual humans working through the hard shit, right? Like, we're having these conversations anyways. Let's hit record and just share them with people, because like, we want people to know, that they're not alone going through this. Even us as life coaches, the reason we are life coaches is because we've come through really unhealthy, toxic personas of ourselves and relationships with others. And we found a place of more wholeness. And we're continuing to grow. Just because we're a life coach and a life therapist doesn't mean we haven't figured out. We've just found a way that's, again, more easeful. There's less pain. We're filled with more light, more gratitude. We want to share that. We want to serve. And so it's this idea of just being able to give, to contribute. And if somebody else can find resonance with that and start to, like, it impacts their journey positively, right? It's that ripple effect. That's why I'm doing this. And that's what I want to do. So, for anybody listening to this show, any of your listeners, I offer a completely free, it's complimentary, no strings attached, like preliminary, like exploratory call, discovery call of like, hey, you got some stuff going on. There's pain points or whatever in your life. Let's chat. Let's have, take, half an hour, 45 minutes. Let's chat and see, like, is this something where, you are looking for some more support? Am I your right flavor? Am I not? I'm happy. I've tons of people connected in the, in the service world, where it's with our coaches or therapists or other people that might be able to refer you, where you might find that support that you are looking for. And so I just want to throw that out there as like an open door for anybody to take that advantage of that opportunity.
That's fantastic. And for those who do want to connect with you, either for that or just to learn more about you, what would be the best way for people to connect with you?
Oh, absolutely. So I'm taking a little hiatus right now from social media. Going through a little rebranding here. So the best way to reach me right now would be my email. And that's going to be Dan at myfeelgoodcoaching.com. You can also visit the website at myfeelgoodcoaching.com, and there are contact links there. And also give me a call, 802-587-2750.
Awesome. So we'll also, for those of you who are like not able to write this down, we'll put it in the show notes as well, and in the description. So if any of you do want to go ahead and reach out and connect with Dan, I highly suggest it. Just as we've seen in our interaction, I mean, literally, this is what, our second time talking, but you could see that, like, when it's the right connection, it's the right fit, like it just works, it clicks. And I feel like Dan and I have known each other for decades. It's just like we have this like kind of weird parallel life, but I think this is a great example of what you're talking about as far as reaching out, extending to other people, and just experiencing others and seeing, who's a good fit, and who might be able to help you on your journey. So,
We are
Dan,
all, I love it. Just a final word here that I really appreciate you having me on, Nolan. There's a phrase from Ram Dass that comes back to this. It's we are all walking each other home. We're not in this
I
alone.
love that.
We are not in this alone.
Yeah.
And that's the biggest point, is wherever you are, there is somebody there willing to listen, whether it's me or another or somebody in your own life. We may never speak. And if you find the support person for you, then I am thrilled. That's it. We are part of this community, right? This is the great collective of the human experience on Earth. We're all human beings. We're all trying to find a better way, and we don't have to do it by ourselves. So
Yes. I love that. Dan, this is exactly what I thought what happened went from the moment I started talking to you when we first met. I'm so glad that we finally had this opportunity to do this, and I am so incredibly grateful for you opening up and sharing so much. It's meant a lot to me, and I know for our listeners, there's going to be a ton of people who resonate and connect with what you shared today, and it's really neat to know that there are people like yourself out there in the world, spreading this kind of hope and connectivity and understanding. And I really thank you for your time today.
Thank you so much, Nolan. It's been a true pleasure, and I couldn't be happier. Thanks for having me on.